The question I'm going to ask today, Dad, Papa, is...
The question that we're going to talk about is...
What is the most scared I've ever been? That one leapt off the page for me.
What was my first big trip?
How was the day of your wedding?
I'm going to talk about how I almost died twice in 2 years.
She was telling me her life story, and she didn't know it was me.
That is an absolutely true story.
And I can tell you about it.
Hi, welcome to the Storyworth Podcast. I'm your host, Krista Baum, co-founder of Storyworth. I'm so glad you're here. If you're new to Storyworth, we help people write their life stories, the big stories and the small ones. Each week on the podcast, we ask questions that help us hold on to a person's life story and get to know our loved ones a little bit better. Today, a daughter asks her mom about a house fire that sparked her mom to forge a new, more creative path in life.
My name is Chelsea Daniel. I'm a producer and musician from New York. Mom, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Alicia Hilton Daniel. I'm an interior designer and a licensed general contractor and the owner of Hilton Daniel Design and Construction based in Durham, North Carolina.
I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about when I was really young. You made this large pivot that I feel like really impacted the way our life was. What made you decide to shift your life a little bit?
So when you were, this was long before Chloe came along, I think you were maybe 4. We had a house fire. And that was sort of this awakening moment for me. I had been a paralegal for many years. And at this time, I was pursuing law school. I was studying for the LSATs. And once this fire happened, instantly, I knew that I did not want to take that pathway.
I was so young, so I don't really remember a lot. All I remember is you telling stories about oh, Chelsea, you were so brave, you helped me through it. But can you kind of set the scene of what the fire, where we were, what it looks like, how you felt in that moment?
We live in North Carolina, so we're in the South, right? So there was this ice storm of 2002 that set a record, and we were not prepared, and the infrastructure and the resources were not available because this had never happened before. So the ice storm put us out for 2 weeks. There was no power in the area, no matter where you lived in North Carolina in the Triangle area. There was no electricity. There was very few resources. And this house had a wood-burning fireplace, which we utilized, obviously. That was how we kept warm. And, in the wee hours of the morning, there was a banging on the door. Your father came and got me up. And you actually, Chelsea, because I think I was sort of in disbelief. And so it didn't register right away. And I think I had to be taken out of the house. I'd never had something like this happen before. So I was maybe trying to process it. And then we went outside and the fire truck came instantly. And we basically just watched the flames on top of the roof. And it was dark, it was the wee hours. I think it was maybe 3 or 4 in the morning. It was freezing and it was quiet, eerily quiet. And I felt overwhelmed because I had this little girl that I was actually looking at to comfort me rather than me comforting her. It was just kind of very instantaneous. You reached out and wanted to protect me rather than the other way around. I think that you just saw something in me that you felt that you needed to be my caretaker because you were my little caretaker. What was really devastating, though, was after the fire was over, I had to walk or go back to the home with the insurance company, and the house was a wreck. And I walked up the stairs into what was our primary bedroom. And when I opened the door, you could just see outside. So I opened the door and the whole wall was gone. And I remember just like, I broke down. I broke down completely. That event was definitely one of the most tragic events that I've had in my life.
Did we lose anything in the fire?
It wasn't like a total loss. Like, you didn't lose anything really. Maybe some of your toys got wet or damaged, but we lost a lot of like photos of you when you were a baby, photos of Dad and I when we were, you know, in college or growing up, when I met him in college. So a lot of our youthful photos we lost, and that was hard. Still is today.
So the house fire prompted a major change in your life. You decided to quit your job as a paralegal and start a new career as an interior designer. How did you decide to make that choice?
So I guess you'd have to dig back into my early years as a child, my formative years. I was known throughout my primary education as the little girl that loved to draw and paint and love art. I had 38 cuts from my math class in high school because I'd go to the art gallery. I was afraid of math, but I loved art. I loved everything about it. I could tell you every contemporary artist, every modern Black artist. I loved art, texture, reading, all of that. And I just knew in school, when I was in high school, I wasn't, you know, we had a single mom, so I had to work a job and go to school. So my grades were okay. But I just had this yearning that I wanted to do art. And I was deterred from that pathway. Unfortunately, the elders, you know, the people that I looked to, mentors, guidance counselors, said time and time again that art was a hobby. It was not a career. And that because I liked to argue and I had the gift of gab, that I should be a lawyer. Based on nothing other than that, I was told that. And so I followed that pathway and never even sat and thought on my own, well, what do you want to do? And so having the fire, I think, sort of ignited that, like, okay, I really love art, but I love interiors. I named you Chelsea after Chelsea, New York, because when I worked in the city, I used to love to walk down the cobblestone streets of New York and look inside the interiors of people's homes. Just see like, oh my gosh, like how is the furniture arranged? What's the wallpaper? What's the lighting? What does it look like? It all came to fruition though, when my mom found a photo of me, and I think I was a preteen, and I had designed and built a model modern home based out of objects found in the house, around the yard. I was always using my hands to create something. And that was it. I didn't think I was smart enough to go to architecture school. And that's a whole nother story. But interior design felt safe. And I love interior design. And once I understood what interior designers could do, then that was it. I mean, school was it just came naturally.
This brings me back to when I was young and you were in school, like you mentioned, and you were pregnant with Chloe, my younger sister.
7 years apart.
Yeah. And you were doing these art projects and you would whiz through them and you'd stay up all night and you were literally pregnant. Can you talk a little bit about the moment that you decided to enroll in school?
Obviously, I was a young mom. I wanted to go to a school that was local, that I could get to and from. So Meredith College in Raleigh, which was just 17 miles away from home, made sense. And I actually called the head of the department And she helped me, guided me through the qualifications because I already had one degree. And, unfortunately, to be an interior designer, you had to start from scratch. Pretty much, I ended up getting a second degree in interior design with a minor in studio art.
I am curious, like your life as a paralegal, what you learned doing that route and how that impacted and informed your art school education.
So Sullivan and Cromwell it still is, a large corporate law firm in Lower Manhattan. And I was the first Black woman that they hired as a full-time employee paralegal. And that was in 1996, 95 or 96. I can't remember. Back then, if I got out of work at 8 p.m. at night, that was early. So I usually worked till 9, 10 o'clock at night. It was a grueling job.
When you told Dad that you no longer wanted to do this and decided to make the pivot, where did you begin?
I grappled with okay, how do I tell him? But at the same time, I had to speak my truth. And your father has always been the most just lovely. I mean, he's a person of few words, but he has a lot of empathy and a lot of belief in who I am. And when I went to him and I was like, I don't want to go to law school. I think I want to do interior design. He didn't hesitate. He was like, we'll figure it out. It was a lot because even when I was in school and when I got pregnant with Chloe, that was shocking and stressful, but he made it work. I took off a semester, gave birth to her, and went right back. And then I also had to work a part-time job on the weekends.
I love that. And that's a good way to talk about just your business and maybe life after college. Tell the story of where you started working and how you decided to open your own business.
Right. My story is pretty cool because I graduated in 2008 when there was a huge recession, right? The market had crashed and I was pretty stressed. And I came to school one day and I was working and going to school and raising 2 girls. And I knew that we were having our portfolio review and that, architectural firms or companies that were looking for interior designers were coming to visit. And I show up at my portfolio review in a room full of women. Meredith was an all-women's college and a very all-white women's college, very conservative. And I show up with my laptop and my hard copy of my portfolio. And everyone had flowers and chocolates and cookies and were just dressed, like Southern belles. And I went to my professor, Dr. Burpitt, and I was like, Dr. Burpitt, do I need to go home and change? And do I need to go get some flowers? And she was like, you look great. And I don't think you need to go get flowers. And I was like, okay, because I do not have the budget to go and buy flowers. And there was a architectural firm that came to my table and saw my portfolio and then came back to me and said, would you mind coming in for an in-person interview at our firm tomorrow? And that's it. I got my first job.
That's so cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You said, what did you say that you were wearing?
I was dressed, professionally. Everyone was dressed in these beautiful dresses, very Southern belle, right? And I, again, New Yorker, practical, a former paralegal. I think I came I had a blazer on, some slacks, nothing over the top. I didn't have flowers or chocolates or cookies. I just had my work. This is me. This is my work. And it worked out. And I ended up staying at that firm for 7 years. After 7 years, I was, left and decided I needed to be closer to home. And there was an architectural firm that was walking distance from our home. So I applied there and got the job. I decided that once I was going to be closer to home, and your father and I collaborated on this, that it was going to be to figure out how I could then start our company. And I didn't really know what that looked like back then. But your father looked at me and said, you should be a general contractor. And it was just something that someone had to say, because that didn't make sense. There was no one that looked like me that was a general contractor. So it didn't even dawn that I could do it until he said it. And I was like, well, yeah.
What does your business look like now? And what's like the first project you feel like you got excited about doing?
I'm always excited about my own projects. All of my modern houses have been my favorite projects, as well as the homes that we've renovated for ourselves. And I think like we just have this mutual love for this profession, and it's our business. And it means so much to me.
Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood? Did your upbringing in Jamaica inform why you felt like it was so important to own your own business?
Perhaps. I mean, I left when I was 4. Right? No, I'm sorry. We lost the business when I was 4 and we came to the States.
Explain that a little bit more.
Yeah. So I came from a small town in Jamaica called Morant Bay. We went to school in the capital, Kingston, but we lived and owned a grocery store in Morant Bay, and my dad owned it. So pretty much his dad gave him a choice to either go to college or he gave him a lump sum of money to start his own grocery store. And of course, my father chose the latter. I don't believe he was mature enough at the time. They were, very young. My mom had me. She had me when she was 25, but I have a sister that's 3 years my senior. So my mom got married young, and they both decided they weren't going to pursue college and that they were going to run this grocery store in a very small town. And for basically my mom ran the grocery store. The grocery store pretty much was managed by her. She took care of it. It was her shop. My father was not the best of human beings. He was never around. And when he was around, it was scary. He was violent. He would, beat us for having holes in our clothing from playing. If we played outside and got dirty, it made him angry. We grew up pretty much afraid of this person that was supposed to nurture and care for us. And so, it was not sustainable. There was no way that my mom could continue to manage this grocery store on her own. We were also dealing with the upheaval of the 2 political parties in Jamaica at the time. So owning a business, you were marked a capitalist. So my mom said that on many occasions when she would go to get gas, her life would be threatened. And so we lost the grocery store when I was 4. We ended up moving into the capital, into Kingston. I don't have a clear memory because I was such a little girl, and I think a lot of the trauma I kind of blocked out. But it was a very unhappy life. So, yeah, my life in Jamaica, I don't like to talk about it. There are these beautiful albums of us as little children, but we were not happy. It was a very hard life. And then coming to the States was hard. My mom and my dad were still married. They landed in the States in 1979. And I don't remember him staying with us more than a week. And so he left my mom to fend with 4 young children. We were all very young in age. And it's a very daunting life.
I do want to skip ahead a little bit, Mom, and talk about the ways that I feel like I see you and the way that you've influenced me with art. Because I think that seeing you when I was younger, raised my sister and I feel like you and Dad are the hardest workers I've ever seen, always working till super late. But the path that you and Dad have set, for me at least, I don't know how Chloe feels, but I think I was always I felt very at peace with choosing to do a creative career. I think I told people I was majoring in music and people would laugh at me. And I remember like a kid I went to middle school with in North Carolina, when I told him, like, he was like, oh, what are you studying at UT? And I was like, piano. And he like laughed and he was like, you're not going to make any money. And I was like, okay, maybe I won't, but at least I'm doing the thing I want to do. And I think seeing you do something that you loved, it encouraged me to want to take a risk and do the thing that I felt I loved as well. So I feel like you and Dad are really the reason that I did that.
Well, I love that. I think it was always important for me that my children not worry about picking a quote unquote sensible career. You know, I don't even think the conversation was even had with your dad and I. It was just like, we're going to let them figure out who they are. Now, I did have to push you because I saw in you what you didn't see in you. You know, you were just like, I hate the word different. You were just unique. You were just special. You were too special to be where you were. And so going to the University of North Carolina School of the Arts for high school gave you your wings. It wasn't easy. You faced, you know, a lot of prejudices because you were a Black girl studying piano, but you soared and you realized that you are an artist. And so it was important that my daughters be individuals and they tell me what they want to be, you know, not me telling them, because that's not parenting. You know, it's time to change that thinking and that way of learning, to unlearn that. And I just always knew that I would have, you know, if I had children, that was not going to be the path, or I was not going to be that kind of a parent.
What lesson did you want Chloe and I to take from who you are? And
look, I think it's just like determination. You know, right now I'm dealing with my mom, you know, aging, and, you know, that's not going really well. But I still am determined to make something of my business and creating something, leaving the world saying that here is the mark that I left. And to also know that life gives you many chances. I went back to school at 32. You know, I was scared. So hopefully I've, you know, given you guys that outlook, like, you know, just do what you do and it'll work out in the end.
That's it for this episode of the Storyworth Podcast. I'm Krista Baum. Thanks so much for listening. If you want to get started writing your own book of life stories or want to give the gift of Storyworth to a loved one, head over to storyworth.com. And if you want one of your stories to be considered for the podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us at storyworth.com/podcast. The Storyworth Podcast was produced by the folks at Good Weight Productions. Remember, everyone has a story worth sharing. See you soon.